Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Day Chats. I am your host, Daisy Michelle, and if this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you stay. I hope you enjoy. This is a podcast where we talk about anything and everything and finally own up to our mistakes, our journeys, and our not so great moments. And of course, we psychoanalyze ourselves. So let's get the ball rolling. So today's episode, we are going to talk all about being a workaholic and this toxic productivity wave that we are seeing so much on social media. I don't know about you guys, but I see it all the time with the boss babe community. And this is no shade to them whatsoever. Like, I'm here for it. You know, do your business, do what you got to do. Like, I'm no one here to judge. What grinds my gears is truly when they start saying how you have to grind and you have to hustle all the time. The biggest one that really just irks me is when they say, you're on your phone anyway, why don't you just get on your phone and make some money? You're just scrolling on social media. You might as well be getting paid. Like, gosh, relax. Not every single second of your life is meant to be all about working. You know, it's okay to browse on social media every once in a while, just to browse and see what's going on with other people's lives. What is everybody else up to? So let's get right into it. It really pushes my buttons and gets me so annoyed whenever I see people constantly posting about this idea of being productive. And this idea that if you are not being productive every single second of the day, then you are wasting your life. You are wasting your days, your weeks, your months. Your goals are not going to get accomplished just because you're not being productive every single second of your life and you're not out here, quote, hustling or, quote, grinding. It takes a lot out of me to see their posts and not respond. Sometimes I just really want to go in there and say, bro, just shut up. Like, let people live. Like, if they want to be browsing on social media every once in a while and just see what's going on, let them. We don't know what's going on in their lives. So for people to sit here and say that someone isn't being successful or isn't being productive just because they're browsing on social media or posting about what song they like or lip singing or whatever, I don't know. That just, it bugs me. But I'm sure a lot of you probably can relate to seeing that, especially on social media, on Instagram. Personally, Instagram is where I see it the most. You see everyone posting about maximizing quarantine and getting their life together. And don't get me wrong, like, I'm so here for people trying to take advantage of the situation that we are in and trying to make the most of it to the best of their abilities. I'm not against that. What really bothers me is the idea that we are in this position of opportunity that everyone has. It's almost like making light of the situation that we are in and making it seem like we are on some vacation. We're not. Tons of people lost their jobs. Tons of people lost their family members. Tons of people are going through struggles that they're having a hard time coping with. We are going through a collective trauma as a whole. So no, this isn't some vacation. No, this isn't some opportunity. Maybe for some, yeah. But for others, it's not. And in my opinion, we should not be posting things on social media to make people feel bad in efforts to try to push them into being more productive for whatever agenda it is that you're wanting them to be. Another one of the things that I see people post all the time is, if you don't have enough time in the day, make more time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against that. I'm not against people maximizing their time, but it's just the way people are advertising this. I see people say, go to sleep late and wake up early. I don't know about you, and I was talking about this with my therapist earlier today, but it is not healthy, nor is it sustainable to only sleep 2 to 3 hours a night and pretend like you're maximizing your time. That is not healthy, and that is not something that we should be pushing out to the masses, pretending like that's normal or pretending like that's okay, because it's not. And my therapist totally agreed with that. So cut it out. Stop doing it. I see so many tips on how to maximize most of this quarantine, as like I said, as if this was some kind of optional vacation thing that wasn't causing any kind of detriment to society or individuals. And like I said, I'm not against the principle behind getting more time in your day. So yeah, go to sleep at a reasonable time, wake up a little bit early if you're getting sufficient hours of sleep that your body requires to be healthy and be alert. But realize that for everyone, that may not be sustainable and that may not look the same for everyone. Somebody else maybe can wake up early, but they need to go to sleep earlier in order to do that. And not only that, but you are better off waking up later and being well rested than waking up earlier and being so tired, so groggy that you cannot even focus on whatever task you're working on. So don't be afraid to get as much sleep as you need. If you need 6 hours, if you need 8 hours a night, get your sleep in, but at least you're going to be well rested enough to where you can actually focus on it, whatever it is that you're working on. So now I've given you a couple examples that I'm sure a lot of you have seen and a lot of you guys can recognize. But now let's actually define what that is. So if I didn't describe it, that was all toxic productivity. So according to an article on thequint.com, toxic productivity is defined as an unhealthy and extreme obsession with productivity, which is never ending nor ever enough. It stems from a culture that praises and rewards productivity to an extent where we do not know where to draw the line. And I think that is a very interesting concept. And it really just goes to show that those two examples that I gave above about making extra time in the day or taking advantage of this pandemic as if it was some kind of optional vacation that we've all been on for the past few months or the past year, basically, is only perpetuating that definition of toxic productivity and that idea of toxic productivity. I think in society, we are becoming more accepting of that. And a lot of us are falling in that trap of feeling like we are not doing enough if we are not either showing off that we're working hard, or we're internalizing that within ourselves and feeling guilty for not actually be working as much as we see other people working. And that is a whole separate discussion on its own about the facade that a lot of people put on social media. And don't get me wrong, I am definitely guilty of that as well. You know, sometimes I'll post every now and then when I'm working on a big project. I know a lot of us have fallen into that trap. So it's not a singular thing that happens to just you. Just know that it happens to a lot of people. But where does this even come from? Why have we become a culture that is starting to, or has already been, so accepting of this toxic productivity and starting to adapt to it as if it's our new norm? So after doing some research and truly just thinking about what toxic productivity even is, I realized that it stems a lot behind of the idea of being a workaholic. And I'm going to get more into that in a little bit more. But really, toxic productivity comes from this culture that demonizes laziness and praises productivity and efficiency. And you can see a lot of that in the workplace environment where we and your bosses, for instance, praise our employees for getting their work done or doing things quickly. I know I see it at my job. I've seen it in a lot of different jobs. When I worked retail, you would get better hours if you were a quick cashier when I worked in retail, or when you were able to get the go backs done quicker, you would get better hours, better time. So there was always some kind of reward for being productive and being efficient. If you were available to take extra shifts, that would only get managers to like you more. The idea behind it itself isn't so bad because it really does encourage people to work hard at whatever field or career they're working in. But it becomes dangerous and toxic when it starts to become obsessive. And in my opinion, it starts to become obsessive when you start forming this identity behind your job to a point where it starts to affect who you see yourself as a person. And like I said, I see it a lot in the boss babe and entrepreneur people. They constantly are posting about being successful or wanting to be successful and the sacrifices that they're willing to make from that. And a lot of the times that can be sacrifices with family, sacrifices with friends and not going out, and yet still putting out this facade that they have freedom of time, freedom of everything. But yet we see them on their phone all the time. We see them posting all the time. So how free are you if you are a prisoner to your phone? It really had me thinking about where this toxic productivity ideology is coming from and what areas we're starting to see it more accepted, especially on social media. But where I see it more is being a workaholic. And this is where the psychoanalyzation portion is going to come. So bear with me because I put a lot of thought into this. And this is really just the beginning of my psychoanalyzation. I feel like if I think about it more, I can go more into detail. But this is just the start of it. So again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying you shouldn't put hard work and time when you're building a business or a career. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't sacrifice things. When you're building something, you're not always going to have time to go to every single event or do every single thing with your family. And I'm not saying that it makes you a bad person for prioritizing your business or your career for that. But I'm saying we should have boundaries, we should have limits, and we should respect those. And it becomes toxic productivity when we start to disrespect those boundaries. And it becomes dangerous or a dangerous plan when you begin to glorify and promote sacrificing your important events and people in order to get into your dream income bracket. Because truly, that's how I personally see it. People are working this hard to become a part of this bracket of income. Not necessarily for the position or the job itself, but to get a monetary value behind it. I'm not trying to come out here for the people in these businesses. I respect the hustle, but I'm also critiquing the way that they're choosing to go about it. So it also focuses on a direct and tangible success at the expense of physical and mental health. And that's exactly what I mentioned about the monetary value in return. So when we allow our physical and mental health to deteriorate in order to keep up this facade, and whether that's to ourselves and we want to admit it or not, or to the public, like when we post things on social media, we are wiring ourselves to believe that our needs are not as important as the needs of others and the monetary production. And I'm going to repeat that because when I first thought about that, it really put things more into perspective. So when we disrespect our boundaries and we start to put our businesses and our careers first to become a part of this income bracket, notice the verbiage that I'm using. I'm not saying to reach your level of success for your career, to reach a milestone. You're doing things to get into your income bracket and you start to disrespect your boundaries and the boundaries that others have set on you. You are wiring yourself to believe that your needs are not as important as the needs of others. And most importantly, not as important as the monetary production that you bring. So as a sociology major, this really reminded me of like my sociological theory class, which I'm going to get into it a little bit later on, but bear with me, I'll make it super easy and I won't make it complicated. But it just made me think that without caring for our physical and mental health, we become unable to continue achieving our goals and dreams. I know so many times where I did not care for my physical and mental health. And I talked about it a little bit on the first episode with Sarah, where my mental health was in the dumps. I was feeling really not great with my physical self, and I was not producing the best work possible. I was doing terrible at work. And I talk a little bit more about that. So if you want to get into it, feel free to check that episode out. It's episode 1. And we talk about toxic relationships with Sarah. So it just made me think about how being this workaholic or having this idea of toxic productivity just forces or wires us to believe that we have to keep working to get to whatever it is that we need to do at whatever expense. So it just made me think, at which sacrifice do we draw the line and say, this is no longer healthy? This is no longer acceptable. And this is not even a lifestyle that I want to follow, or this is not a lifestyle that I think I can actually follow for a lifetime. So let's get into the signs of toxic productivity. And again, this is from the article on thequint.com. So if you want to check it out, I'll make sure I will leave the link in the Instagram bio so you guys can check it out. But the first sign of toxic productivity is you work so much that it harms your health and personal relationships. So for instance, if you are ignoring basic human requirements like eating, sleeping, meeting with friends and family, and forgetting other obligations, you are showing a sign of toxic productivity. So the second one is having unrealistic expectations. This would be expecting the same output from yourself every single day, irrespectively of external factors and stressful situations that may disrupt normalcy. So, a perfect example is COVID-19, elections, the riots, and literally all of 2020. I don't know how people expect to be productive every single day, 365 days a year, considering the fact that 2020 has been an absolute shit show for the majority of the people. I don't understand where that logic comes from. The third one is being restless or feeling guilty of taking a break or time off and feeling your self-worth reducing. So this is the one that I can relate to the absolute most. I personally would even extend this to perpetuating the idea that recognizing you need a break is some sort of failure or weakness. I see it all the time that people don't want to recognize that they're tired and they need a break because they say, no, like, I'm almost done. I got to keep going. Like, if I stop now, then I'm never going to go back, or it's going to take me a lot longer. I see that idea, especially in school. Like, people are so scared of taking longer than the quote, like traditional time that it takes for someone to finish a degree, when in reality, time is subjective. It doesn't really matter how long something takes you, as long as you get it done and you get it done well. And by well, I don't mean like perfect. I mean well in the sense that you took care of yourself during that time and you didn't overload yourself. So truly, it's just continuing to perpetuate the idea that one must continue pushing and pushing and pushing to reach whatever goal it is that you're looking for. And it's absolutely ridiculous. This can definitely cause some kind of mental and physical damage. And the consequences in the long run are just going to be more detrimental than anything. You're going to start seeing that you're going to have a harder time to set a boundary at work. And this is something that I talked about with my therapist today, is setting boundaries at work is so different than setting a boundary outside of that workplace. Because again, we are so conditioned and so used to allowing ourselves to jump when they ask us to jump. And the only question we ask is how high. So the fourth one, most importantly, attaching your sense of worth to the product of our productivity. Again, this is one that I can relate to a lot. And this is the one that really got me psychoanalyzing myself, because I definitely attach my sense of work to my work ethic. It's something that I'm working on, but even to this day, it's something that I hold very near and dear to me. And this can manifest going above and beyond in all jobs, always bending my flexibility to be available for my jobs, taking extra shifts when needed, staying longer and coming in earlier when asked, taking on additional projects, and just as simple as not knowing how to say no. And I say just as simple, but truly it is so difficult to learn how to say no. I feel almost guilty when I'm not able to jump when work calls. But why? Why do I feel guilty for not being able to work on my free time, on my own time, when I'm not at work? So let's get into the psychoanalyzation. So when I was thinking about all of these topics about toxic productivity and being a workaholic, I started to think about, okay, why would I be this way? I never imagined that I would actually enjoy working for some reason. I don't know why I lived in this fairy tale land where I thought I was like a princess or a queen and I would never have to lift a finger. Obviously, that was not the case. I started working at the age of 18, and coming from a blue collar family, hard work is something that is ingrained in my DNA. For those who maybe have never heard of the term of blue collar, it's basically working in manual labor or manual work industry, basically not an office job. I grew up watching my parents literally busting their ass off to be able to provide the life that we had. We came from pretty humble beginnings, so even though I was an only child, I was always taught the importance of working hard and earning whatever it is that you want. Things were not handed to us ever. My parents had to work really, really hard for everything that we had. So that's something that they instilled in me from a very young age. Not only did I grow up seeing my own parents bust their ass off, but I also saw how my tias and tios would also find ways to provide for their families. And they did so tirelessly. So I was always surrounded by family members who worked blue collar jobs to be able to provide for their family. So I realized that my family in general clung to this idea of the American dream after starting their family. But their idea of the American dream wasn't for them specifically. I realized that they came here and they busted their ass off and dedicated their life to provide me with that American dream, with the opportunities that they never had. So I could have limitless opportunities and take advantage of the things that they never had growing up, or things that they'll actually never be able to benefit from. When thinking about that, I remember the sense of pride that my parents would get when they would get some kind of positive reinforcement and recognition at work, or the pride that they felt when they were working and they were recognized despite the language barriers. My mom speaks a better English now, but growing up, she spoke a more broken English. So for her to be able to have all these successes at work was something that they took a lot of pride in. You know, she got quite a few promotions. She's working on her next promotion now. Even to this day, there's still that sense of pride that my parents get when they reach a milestone at their job. So it made me think that this is just my interpretation, you know, obviously I don't know the psyche of my parents, but it just made me think that perhaps having built an entire life here from literally nothing and working so hard to get whatever we have now, that work became a big part of their identity. Work became not everything because my parents thankfully put family first, but sometimes putting family first meant putting work first. That's my mini psychoanalyzation of my parents, but like I said, I don't know their psyche, so that's just my interpretation of that. Yeah, like I mentioned, I started working when I was 18. I was fresh out of high school and I was enjoying the summer before going to college. And I recognized that putting in effort in my job gave me that same sense of pride and added to my identity. So I no longer felt like I was a high school student or I was dependent on my parents because I was finally making a little bit of money. And this was back when the minimum wage was like barely $8. So, I mean, it feels like a really long time ago, but truly it wasn't that long ago. So I no longer felt like I was this dependent student and child. I was now a worker. I was more independent and I was fending for myself. I was building more things on my resume and building upon my set of skills. So I was getting this new sense of independence. So similarly to my parents, when I excelled in work, I felt this sense of pride, which always motivated me to continue chasing that feeling. And it almost became like a game. I always wanted to chase that high of being proud of your work. I loved knowing that I was becoming the best in whatever field I was working in, whether that was when I worked in retail because I had multiple retail jobs, or when I worked at the court, whatever it was, I always got that gratifying feeling when I was chasing that sense of pride. And when I say it all out like that, it truly doesn't sound like anything bad. If anything, it just makes me sound like an overachiever, kind of, because I enjoy working. When I started to think more about it, I noticed that there were patterns that I would follow in order to get to where I was. And the danger comes when I begin to attach a big part of my identity as a worker or an employee. And again, if you remember from the last episode, I mentioned that I was doing terrible in school and in work. And even though I did feel guilty for doing bad at school, I mainly only felt bad because I felt like it was a financial burden to my family. I saw how hard they work and how much they sacrifice to send me to college. So when I was doing bad in that one semester, I felt like I failed them, and I felt like I robbed them of their financial stability in that sense. But I felt the most personal guilt when I was letting down my bosses and not excelling in my jobs. I felt like I was letting a big part of myself down, and that's truly where I felt the biggest part of the danger of always chasing that high of being a workaholic, wanting to go above and beyond for my job. I had attached so much of my identity to my jobs that when I finally crashed, I burned and nobody could have saved me at that point. At that time, nobody could talk me otherwise and convince me that my identity as a whole was not defined solely on my job status or my performance. I felt that because I was doing a bad job, then I wasn't worthy of being a good person. And it sounds so silly when I say it out loud, but I know a lot of you can relate to that. I know a lot of you maybe feel this sense of high when you are getting recognized at work and working so hard on something. But again, we have to ask ourselves, what are we sacrificing to get there? To be working for a corporation or be working for this company where we are now starting to sacrifice our well-being to produce things for this company. And again, with my sociological background, I started to think about how my surroundings affected me, my culture, my household, all these little factors all became suddenly a factor to why I was feeling that way. And I was beginning to feel a sense of alienation from myself. And I'm going to explain what that is. And I have this written down, so just because I don't want to explain it incorrectly. For those of you who don't know, alienation from the self or humanity comes from the theorist Karl Marx, and he describes 4 types of alienation. We're going to focus on alienation of the self or humanity. Marx's theories made huge impacts in different areas of academia. Many of you may have heard of him in economics, political science, and sociology, but I, again, have a background in sociology, so we're going to look at it from a sociological lens. And this is me using my degree here, so stay with me because I'm like such a nerd, and I'll make it super short because I know not everybody is like a nerd like me. So Karl Marx splits people into 2 groups, the bourgeoisie, which are the property owners and the owners of production, and the proletariat, so the employees and workers who don't own property or means of production. So alienation is the feeling of a loss of agency, and agency is being able to act independently without outside factors contributing. So in layman's terms, Marx described alienation of the self, where work amounts to your life's purpose. And I know some of you can relate, where work literally consumes our life. It becomes what we eat, breathe, sleep. We do it all day, every single day. And we become an object of the product that we are producing. So if we think about it in terms of labor, we start to become the product of what we produce. The idea of alienation is related to a capitalist society where a worker is deprived or stripped away from their ability to think and work freely, but rather work to maximize the production to be given to the bourgeoisie, which again, were the owners of production. Now, this is a super simplified explanation of what alienation is. So if you're interested or have any more questions, please write them in. I'm going to provide a link in the Day Chat's Instagram bio. If you want to know more about it, like pick my brain. I love talking about this. Obviously, like I majored in this, so it's my cup of tea. tea, but I don't want to bore you guys. Okay, so if we bring it back to a personal level, I had seen myself become a mechanical worker where I didn't question my role as an employee. I gave myself up to my jobs, and I noticed that I did this in efforts to try to reach a sense of gratification for my production or the value and asset that I added to a company. And we see it all the time on our resume. It's always a question that they usually ask one way or another is, what will you contribute to this company? Or what will you contribute to this team? So you can imagine the downfall and the negative impact it would be to remove that gratification or remove that source of gratification from my identity. So how do we come back from that? I asked myself, okay, so if I'm putting myself back in that position, how would I possibly come back from that? And I struggled. I really couldn't think about something that I would do in order to come back from that. And this is just me being completely honest. This is something that I still struggle with today. I will say, though, that addressing my other mental health struggles has definitely helped me manage this self-identity to my work crisis. But even to this day, it is something that I still catch myself struggling with. One of the things that I've been trying in general is learning how to set boundaries and respect boundaries with myself. And if we're talking about boundaries in the workplace, this is not checking my emails after hours or being reasonable with myself when someone will ask me to complete a certain project after hours. You know, if I am available, I'm happy to help to a certain extent, and then the rest can be completed while I am at work. I want to make sure that I don't over exude myself because I need time for me to recharge. There's nothing wrong with me having time to recharge. So I've been trying to learn how to set boundaries, and it's hard, you guys. Just the other day, I had one of the directors ask me to do something while I was on my lunch break, and I was so tempted to cut my lunch break short just so I could go back to work and do that. But against all temptations, I did not. I did email back and I said, you know, like, I gave them two options. I either can do it right now or and like find someone to do it for them since I was out of the office, or they could just wait for me to come back and I would do it gladly. I chose the latter and everything worked out fine. But it was so hard for me to even get to that point where I said, no, I need to take care of myself first. Even if it's those 30-45 minutes of my lunch break outside of the office, I need to respect that boundary of myself. And I was talking to my therapist about that today, and he said, you know, that's a really good first step. And usually the first step is the hardest. So I think that is my biggest piece of advice just for now is, first of all, be able to recognize that you are starting to adapt the habits of toxic productivity and becoming a workaholic. And secondly, learning how to acknowledge that we need to set boundaries and put that in practice. And also, it's important to remember that it's not easy and it's hard, and sometimes you are going to have to be flexible and bend a little bit, or sometimes it's going to be hard for you to stay strict to your boundaries, but it's all a work in progress. The more you keep doing it, the better you get at respecting your own boundaries. So I'll be the first to admit that it's something that's really hard for me to do. But again, this has a lot to do with I have such a strong sense of identity to the productivity of my work. But I hope this episode was helpful for you all to resonate with and take signs of what toxic productivity is and what it looks like, and what being not an alcoholic, being a workaholic is like, and recognize that it really is almost two sides of the same coin. I will say that toxic productivity is probably a notch up, but it really still seems to be two sides of the same coin, and we need to be careful and take care of ourselves physically and mentally, and not allow these social media facades to rule our mentality and dictate what we think other people are doing, because people only post on social media what they want to post. And that's something that I always have to remind myself, is that people only post what they want to post, whether that's good or bad. A lot of the times it's good things that people want to post, but that doesn't mean that those individuals are not also going through struggles. They're human just like us. So it's always good to remind yourself that just as you are having troubles setting boundaries, they probably are too. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, this solo episode here, learning a little bit more. Once again, I will attach a link in the bio of the Day Chats Instagram where you guys can put in your stories. It could be totally anonymous, or you can pick a pseudonym. That's totally fine. But you guys can write in your stories, whether you have questions or you want to talk about how something you related to and you wanted someone to share it with, or you want to discuss a little more in the next episode. That link will be there for you guys to divulge and talk about whatever it is that you want. So please make sure to check it out. Follow Day Chats on Instagram if you haven't already. Until then, embrace the day.